I'm going to be honest. I think this is the darkest thing that I've ever discussed on this channel. I'm hoping it's going to be the last time that I ever talk about something like this on this channel because it's just not something that we normally see in gaming. Recently, a video was posted by People Make Games, a YouTube channel, and in it, it was an expose, an investigation into a Southeast Asian video game developer that many high-profile names in gaming have been using to outsource some of their work to, and come to find out, that studio is essentially a cult. That's just the best way to describe it. Developers that have their entire lives controlled, living within the studio, controlling when they eat, when they sleep, when they drink water, what they eat, what they dress like, ostracizing them from their families. Emotional and physical trauma that is just unheard of, especially in an industry like this, because it's just not where we normally see this kind of thing. And for some odd reason, and this is the reason why I'm making the video in the first place, is that games media just doesn't want to discuss it. Legacy media just has no interest in tackling this topic, and all they want to do is talk about, well, Ubisoft's response. That's the only thing that I've seen from all of them, which leads me to believe that this is something that the industry itself doesn't want us talking about. Now, beyond that, what I want to do is not only share the story that was shared through People Make Games, but I also want to talk about how I think this is a broader issue that we've seen across the industry, where we have these multi-billion-dollar companies that have all the resources in the world to be able to make some of the greatest games possible, yet they're using their money to pay outsourcers or consultancy agencies to finish the work and get them to the finish line. And 9 times out of 10, it is leading to us getting lower quality products, and now it's also coming at the cost of other people's well-being. I want to talk about that. I've had a lot of viewers either leave comments, reach out on Twitter, or ask in my live streams if I've watched 100 Slaps, the breaking news that the game industry ignored in 2024 by People Make Games. I broke down and I ended up reacting to it live, and I'll be honest, it's heart-wrenching. A harrowing tale of an Indonesian game studio used for outsourcing under the control of a woman looking to be the next Jim Jones or Charles Manson.
That I was going to be kicked out. She said that God talk to her, and so like she said she's going to take me under her wing and give me like 2 weeks to prove myself.
Their investigation uncovered shocking details about Brandoville Studios, an Indonesian studio that Ubisoft, PlayStation, Xbox, and many more have outsourced work to. Their work is going to be featured in Assassin's Creed Shadows, it's been in the Last of Us remake, and the Coalition's entries in the Gears of War series. In their report, People Make Games revealed a disturbing reality about Brandoville Studios. It turned out to be this kind of twisted, exploitative operation where workers were subjected to horrific conditions. Developers weren't just overworked, they were living in the studio, isolated from their families, controlling every single aspect of their lives, from when they could eat, to what they could eat, to even when they could go to the bathroom. Workers face physical and emotional trauma, often under extreme stress, in what became an increasingly dangerous environment to work in. It almost feels like something out of a dystopian novel, but it was real. The story alleged that Cherry Lai, who managed the studio, actively controlled the lives of their employees from the moment they woke up until they went to bed. Cherry allegedly ordered an employee to strike themselves in the face 100 times and then send them a video of their injuries. She would have women of the office send her what they planned on wearing to the office, and then she would criticize them, call them fat and ugly, and say that they shouldn't have been born. She would rally workers to verbally attack or shun other workers, otherwise they would be faced with her wrath. There's employee testimonies of financial control where Cherry would take an employee's entire check because they were bad with money. A video where she's interrogating an employee that's concussed because she told them to slam their head into a door frame. And the account of working a pregnant employee regularly until 3 o'clock in the morning, forcing her out of her maternity leave and ultimately resulting in the loss of her child. I could go into further detail, but I'm just highlighting some of the worst moments that were shared. However, I would recommend that anybody that's out there that's interested to go and watch the original video from People Make Games, because that's the only way that some of these issues get fixed, is if there's more awareness around these issues. Many in Indonesia have found that if there's an issue that doesn't go viral, then the government or their legal system isn't going to do anything about it. With as much virtue signaling as we see in the games industry today, I am surprised that the only people that were discussing this is People Make Games. While the media has covered the topic, they've only just brushed it to the side just to give whatever Ubisoft's response to the investigation was, because Brandoville, their last game that they were working on, was Assassin's Creed Shadows. Ubisoft responded to Eurogamer saying, "We are deeply disturbed by the reports surrounding Brandoville Studios. We strongly condemn all forms of abuse, and Our thoughts are with the affected employees. This response, from my perspective, claims that they were unaware of the situation at Brandoville. They said that they only had learned of the working conditions when people make games publish their video. But here's the thing. Ubisoft knew exactly what kind of studio that they were working with. While they may not have known exactly what was happening, they knew exactly what they were paying for. They chose to outsource work to Indonesia, a country that is known for lax labor laws where companies can get away with practices that would be unacceptable in most parts of the world. That's why these companies outsource to these countries in the first place. They can get it done fast and cheap under any conditions. It's not that Ubisoft didn't know the risks, they knew. It's just that the risks were far less costly than the alternative. The bottom line is lower development costs was what mattered most to them. Now, I don't want to pretend like I'm the one that's virtue signaling here. Overseas outsourcing of work, manufacturing, and materials is popular in just about every single industry that's out there. That's how they cut costs. That's how we save money in the end, and we end up getting cheaper products. But I want to relish in this moment for just a second, because it's incredible how Ubisoft, in the face of criticism over forced diversity in Assassin's Creed Shadows, attempted to position themselves as champions of moral integrity and democratic values. In one of my last videos, I covered an interview where Mark Alexis Cote, the Assassin's Creed boss, referenced how democracies die, suggesting that developers must stand up for their values and not remain silent in the face of threats to their vision, otherwise democracy will crumble. His rhetoric painted himself and his developers as freedom fighters, self-censoring to avoid backlash and risking everything to preserve their ideals. Yet, that high-minded talk is utterly undermined when you take a closer look at Ubisoft's actual actions. Instead of standing firm in their purported values, the company is outsourcing labor to Southeast Asia, where workers endure exploitative conditions, all to cut costs and maximize profits. They are knowingly taking advantage of countries with lax labor laws where they can pay workers less, offer fewer protections, and sidestep ethical responsibility that they seem to claim to hold so dear to their hearts. This stark contrast exposes just how performative Ubisoft's grandstanding truly is. While Cote can speak passionately about the importance of standing up for his democratic values and not giving away their freedom, Ubisoft's behavior reveals a blatant disregard for the very principles that they apparently want to uphold. By exploiting cheap labor in countries with questionable working conditions, they directly benefit from a system that harms vulnerable workers. Their commitment to diversity and inclusivity is a narrative that is completely at odds with their business practices, revealing that their values aren't nearly as virtuous as they'd like us to believe. Now, what's really frustrating for me is how this issue has basically been completely ignored by legacy media. The report from People Make Games is one of the most shocking exposés in the last year, and yet it hasn't had any widespread attention whatsoever. It's been buried, overlooked, or at best, given a few paragraphs in a scattered news cycle around what Ubisoft's response is. Well, what's your response to it? And why is this? Well, the simple truth is the fact that they just don't really like addressing these kind of stories head on because it doesn't really fit into the narrative of gaming that they want to promote. It's easier to focus on the glitz and glamour of AAA titles and the hypes around new releases, but outside of that, they don't really want to talk about the things that are really going on in the industry. What's crazy is with as much coverage as we've seen from industry layoffs, how are overseas workers not a part of your narrative? It must be hard for them, hard to confront the reality of exploitation in the industry, especially when a major publisher like Ubisoft is involved. Here again, we are with a sort of complicity between big media outlets and major gaming publishers. The media benefits from positive coverage and early access reviews, and the publishers benefit from the media's largely uncritical support. If the media was really interested in protecting the interests of consumers and the employees, really defending these people, then they would be holding these companies accountable, but that's not what we're seeing. Instead, what we get to see is something that's becoming a much more common trend, which is them defending the industry and ignoring the parts that would actually make a difference. It's all performative empathy. That's all it's ever been. That's all it ever will be, because at the end of the day, their actions never line up with the words that they speak. They just want everybody to think that they're just so virtuous and righteous, but you're just a slug like the rest of us. You don't want everybody else to know that, but it's the truth. You know, Ubisoft, I'm going to give you guys a little bit of a secret. Don't tell anybody, okay? This is why your games suck. It's because you're fake people saying fake things, taking fake actions, when at the end of the day, none of that stuff is actually lining up. Real people make real games. At least that's my perspective, or at least that's my experience in the past. Because the very generic nature of your being is then reflected onto the games that you're making, and that's why your games aren't very good. The gall of these people to go and do an interview and talk about how gamers complaining is an assault on their fundamental freedoms and how they need to fight back, these freedom fighters they are over at Ubisoft, while at the exact same time they are outsourcing to Southeast Asia, where some of the working conditions are the worst that I've seen in a really long time, working unreal hours to get some of their games done on the cheap. Gotta love it. This is such a mask off moment for both games media and the games industry at the exact same time, because on the games industry part, you have you have writers and journalists that have been talking about, the layoffs, but apparently you guys don't care about workplace conditions as long as it's not in California. And then on the industry side, the issue that I have, there's a lot of different issues that I have with this, but one of the things is that we have so many publishers and studios that have normalized outsourcing work to the point where they're not even really vetting any of these companies that they're working with in the first place. And as a result, we are getting lower quality products because they are rushing and pushing and trying to get to release as quickly as they possibly can for as cheap as they possibly can. And we're the ones that are suffering as a result of that. And also the workers as well. And I actually think that this is something that is a leading cause as to why so many games have just felt bad. The process of game development is a massive, complex undertaking. At the heart of it lies the studio, where the talented team of designers, programmers, artists, and writers all come together to build a world. But as the scope of that project grows, so does the need for more hands on deck. Personally, I think this is one of the biggest issues that's plaguing AAA gaming right now, where studios just want to keep making games bigger and bigger because they think that's how they can add value to the game, where studios are overscoping their projects, bloating their games out, and putting themselves up against a wall, needing more developers to help them finish the game. Whether it's creating detailed environments, producing hundreds of character models, designing quests, writing narratives, or ensuring that the game runs smoothly across all platforms, there is simply not enough hours in a day for an in-house team to handle everything. Outsourcing has become a staple of modern game development. Large studios in particular often face immense pressure when it comes to meeting deadlines or staying within budget, all to appease shareholder interests. And in this high-stakes environment, the easiest way to manage the pressure is to turn to external contractors who specialize in specific areas of game development. By outsourcing, companies can quickly scale without the need for overhead of hiring and training new employees. Commonly outsourced tasks include art design, QA, sound design, and full game modules like combat or multiplayer systems. Art and asset creation are frequently outsourced to agencies or freelancers like Brandoville Studios, which helps manage the large volumes of work at a lower cost. QA testing is another area that's often outsourced to meet tight deadlines, but this is a compromise of quality. Rush QA can lead to a lot of issues, as we saw with the launch of Cyberpunk 2077, where outsourced testing contributed to that game's critical issues. When Cyberpunk 2077 launched, it was a disaster. The game was filled with bugs, glitches, and performance issues. A lot of the blame ended up falling on CD Projekt Red's decision to outsource their QA to Quantic Lab, a Romanian company. Reports ended up saying that Quantic Lab's employees were underpaid and overworked, with little time to even properly test the game in the first place. These rushed tests and major missed issues ended up contributing to one of the worst game launches in video game history. In hindsight, outsourcing such a crucial task was a huge mistake, one that damaged the studio's reputation and took years to cover from. Even now, they still haven't fully regained players' trust. Cyberpunk 2077 isn't the only example of this. Sweet Baby Incorporated, an agency that's known for their narrative design, has faced heavy criticism. Now, while they've been at the center of a culture war debate, their work on narrative-heavy games has been called out for failing to deliver on the high-quality stories expected from AAA titles. Their contributions have been blamed for incoherent, shallow, and often offensive narratives that fail to resonate with players. Since the story is the central part of many games, outsourcing it to a different agency really doesn't make a lot of sense, and you can see what kind of disastrous results it can lead to. Anthem is another really good example of a game that suffered from outsourcing issues. The game heavily relied on external studios for components like art and even its gameplay, aiming to speed up development and cut costs. However, this ended up leading to an inconsistency in their design choices and a lack of cohesion. For example, the art direction varied greatly, with some areas being completely stunning and others underwhelming, due to different teams that were working on separate assets. The combat system is just the same. This is something that's crucial for any multiplayer game, but it ended up feeling disconnected from the overall game and its open world design. Outsourcing contributed to these inconsistencies, playing a major role in that game's critical failure and eventual abandonment. There are a ton of other examples that I could go through, and to be honest with you guys, if we actually sit down and looked at some of the games that have failed over the last couple of years, we'd likely find more games that were suffering from some of these outsourcing issues. But while outsourcing can be incredibly effective, there are a ton of successful companies that either offer those kind of services or use them. It requires strong leadership and a vision to make sure that these studios are using the right people for the right job and making it copacetic with the overall philosophy and quality that that game is supposed to deliver. But that's not happening. And we've seen that across the entire games industry. Strong, competent leadership is lacking, and ultimately it's leading to games that fail. As the gaming industry continues to chase these bigger and more ambitious projects, the scope of their high-profile titles has ballooned. Developers strive to deliver more content, more features, and a world that feels even more massive, hoping that it's going to convince players that they're getting more value out of their money. But in the pursuit of all of that scale, many of these companies have lost sight of the fundamentals. Instead of focusing on the heart of the experience, the quality of the game, working on their own game, they've turned to outsourcing, shifting the burden to low-wage workers in other countries. These workers often face horrific conditions from exploitative management and practices that we would never even see in the West, and working insane hours all the time. And how do we think that that's going to be conducive to making a great game or making a great product at the end of the day? We have publishers and studios that are purposefully and knowingly delivering a low-effort product, all while cutting costs off the back of workers who receive little to no recognition for their contributions. Look at the mistreatment of the Brandoville employees. Am I to believe that those employees, under those conditions, can provide anything of high enough quality for a AAA game at $70? The product that we receive at the end of the day has been cheapened, and the industry's obsession with cost cutting has led to a decline in quality, hurting both the workers and the players. As consumers, we deserve better, and as humans, these developers deserve better. When I worked in construction, one of the things that was really popular, I saw this across the board. It wasn't just the company that I worked for. A lot of other companies do this, but they would outsource a lot of material from third-party contractors or overseas contractors to be able to get it done on the cheap. The idea was, at least with the piping company that I was with for a while, they wanted to order the pipe already made, put together, welded, everything like that, because they just wanted to snap it together on site, bolt it up, because it's way cheaper. You don't got to pay the welders. Welders get paid a lot of money. They're the most expensive thing on a job site more times than not. But also divas, too. Don't pretend like you're not if you're one that's out there. But one job I was on, 8 miles of pipe had to be recut and re-welded because all the welds were busted, the lengths were off, nothing actually lined up the way that it was supposed to. And why would it? Because the people that made it weren't there. They're not involved in the project. They're just taking on whatever information that you're giving them. And in a lot of cases, that's not going to be enough. You need to have people that are physically involved with these projects. And I think that's likely what's going on with game design as well. I think that in a lot of cases, we have games that are coming out that are using some of these outsourced companies that don't share the creative vision. Or in the case of Brandoville, you have people that are working under duress. Some of the worst working conditions that I've seen within this industry, working insane hours, people that are damn near beating their employees. What do you expect? What kind of high quality work do you think that you're going to get out of a studio like that? Especially one that's not there. They're not on the front lines. They don't see the creative vision or how the game's even supposed to fit together. Yeah. I've been sitting around thinking to myself, why have games gotten so expensive? $300, $400, $500 million, $1 billion budget on a video game. How do you spend that much money? And then I come to realize it's likely because they're outsourcing things, trying to get it done fast and cheap, then getting it back and it doesn't work. And then they got to do it themselves, or they got to hire more people, or they got to extend their development period, or whatever it might be. And it's costing them a ton of money to do so, rather than if they would have just done it themselves. Look at CD Projekt Red. They outsourced their QA, and they took 2 years to fix those issues and balance the game. That's a lot of money, man. That's a lot of money. I sit back and I also think about the way that these game journalists have been talking about industry layoffs and things like that, and condemning players for pushing back against Sweet Baby Incorporated and stuff like that. Why wouldn't you join us on that if you care about these developers' jobs? Because from my perspective, that work should have gone to those employees rather than sending it off to somebody else that doesn't have anything to do with that project whatsoever. That's the way that I see it. You know, and I'm not going to listen to any of these studios or publishers feign ignorance over, you know, what's going on with like companies like Brandoville and stuff like that. Oh my, that's abhorrent. How could they do something like that? We condemn them for doing so. We would never do that to our employees. Oh shit. You paid somebody else to do it. You want me to believe that you guys are so incompetent that you didn't vet a company that was going to make assets for one of the most important, now the most important game release of your company's history? I mean, you could definitely persuade me to believe that they're that stupid because I've seen them do some pretty stupid stuff, but that's pretty dumb. That's pretty dumb. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed the video. I think this is something well worth discussing. I think it's an interesting topic, but it's also something that needs to be shared across the board. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you guys did, share it to your friends, like the video, subscribe to the channel, follow me on Twitch, check me out on Twitter. There's a link probably in the description or something like that. Outside of that, stay cool, stay righteous, stay safe. I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace.
Family, family, family.